Okay, today's daf we're going to be learning is Pesachim Kuf Yud Bet. Today's daf, did I just say the wrong daf? Kuf Yud Aleph. Confusing between the Friday and the Shabbat. We're on Kuf Yud Aleph. Today's daf is sponsored by Danny Sadnoff in memory of Frank Sadnoff, Ephraim Mordechai ben Menachem Mendel Zichrono Livracha, remembered as a loving father, brother, husband, and son. And by Yomi Sussman in honor of her husband, Josh. Happy birthday. Thank you for always inspiring me to keep learning and growing. You're such a role model to our sons. Love, Romy, and the boys. And by Zev Gewurtz in honor of his wife, Risa's 50th Hebrew birthday and in celebration of everything she does, including learning our Pesachim this year together with our daughters in preparation for Pesach. Okay, we're going to get started with our daf, Kuf Yud Aleph. Sorry for the confusion before. We're starting from the bottom of Kuf Yud, the very last few words. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Okay, if you remember what was our topic, we were talking about zugot, pairs, and how drinking cups of wine in pairs can cause demons to come or evil spirits. Okay, we're going to have a lot more talk of demons today. We're going to learn names of demons, how to deal with the fact when you have a situation where a demon came. Okay, I think that the idea is it's a little bit tricky about the whole understanding of this section, as we talked about before. Unclear exactly, number one, what this is doing here in Pesach, why we're talking about demons, what this means. Is it psychological, as we saw in yesterday's daf about one of my favorite lines, kol de kapi bahadeh, and kol de lo kapid kapte bahadeh, right? If you're scared of them, then they'll get you. But if you're not worried about them, then there's not really nothing at all. And this could be a way of the rabbis dealing with the fact that people might have thought that these were things that people believed in, but that they weren't really there. It was just that the rabbis understood that people were scared of these things and they didn't want to say, oh, you're believing in nonsense. So it could be that they, left these things there. Maybe some of the rabbis did believe in this. Maybe they're real. Maybe it's psychological. All different ways to understand this. Again, quite complicated for our eyes to really or our understanding to grasp all of this and what's going on, but there's certain themes that you can see. Okay, we'll see a few themes today. Some of them have to do with in dangerous places, and maybe even the idea of drinking in pairs maybe had to do with this idea of controlling how much wine you drank. So that story of the person who went into the store and drank so much wine and then lost track, right? Then maybe you have to sort of keep track of when you're drinking so that you're still conscious, and maybe that was a way of preventing that. There's issues of tzniut, okay, or going into dangerous places. So we'll get to all different, in tzniut, I mean like issues between men and women and things like that. There was concern for that, and therefore they wanted to, warn people about that. So there's certain themes that we can see. Some people talked about this more in tomorrow's stuff, but some people think that that shadim, evil spirits, or bacteria. It's another word for bacteria, which you can see in certain of these sugyot that it seems to be bacteria related, but not all of them fit that theme. So anyway, that's really from the end of today's daf and lead into tomorrow's. So with that, let's get started. So a lot of lack of clarity here, I would say. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, kol hamazug mitztaref, chutz min hamayim. Normally, we say it has to be the same type of drink in order to have it connect to another drink to say this is a problem of pairs or it's not a problem of pairs. But anything that's diluted, where you have this concentrate and then you dilute it, usually they would do it even with hot water. It's what we call mazug. So anything like that can combine with another for purposes either to fix a pair problem or to create a pair problem. Rabbi Yochanan Amar afilu mayim. Oh, so the first opinion said other than water. If you dilute water, that doesn't count. We're going to have to talk about what exactly does it mean to dilute water. It's not like water is concentrated and then we add more. Rabbi Yochanan Amar afilu mayim, and he's going to really be more of an issue to explain what does he mean that water could be an issue of diluted water. So Amar Papa lo amaran. So Papa says when Rabbi Yochanan said that, he didn't mean ela, meaning he only meant chamima lego karire v'karire lego chamime. If you mix hot water into cold water or cold water into hot water, that's what we call diluted water. But if you put water of the same temperature and water of the same temperature, that's not going to be an issue. So if you do the following four things, you're basically getting yourself into a dangerous situation where you could theoretically be getting yourself killed. And not only that, but you should get killed for doing this. Okay, now you're not going to wonder because these don't seem like very harsh things. But again, what they're saying is the way they believe is that if there's evil spirits lurking in these places, then by you going there, you're basically causing yourself to get killed. If you go urinate between a palm tree, we're going to see a lot about palm trees today. Okay, I'm not sure why. Maybe I thought of one idea, maybe because palm trees are so tall that maybe they thought that there was some sort of power in the palm tree because it's so much taller than most of the other trees. So maybe that's why. I don't know if it's the tallest tree of the trees that were indigenous to where they were living, but maybe. So if you urinate between a palm tree and the wall, you have to remember the idea of evil spirits or demons, whatever we might call them, are that they're not in the center of the street where everybody is. They come out when there's nobody there. So where is it the most dangerous? If you're between a palm tree and a wall, that's all the way on the side. So yes, we had someone yesterday about the man who hugged the palm tree. We're going to have another case of something, this time not the man hugging the palm tree, but the spirit getting stuck in the palm tree and banging into it and also bursting the same way it happened in the daf before. So that's the first one. You shouldn't walk in between two palm trees. That's also very dangerous. If you drink water that's borrowed, okay, we're going to have to understand this better. One of the things we're going to see today is that we're going to have a lot of these situations where they say there's demons here, and then they limit it and they say, well, not exactly like this, but only if it's this criteria and that criteria and that. And yes, it's true that between two palm trees, but we're going to see it depends on the situation. Or yes, borrowed water, but it depends who's borrowing the water, where they're borrowing the water, etc. Which might have been a way of the rabbis kind of saying, well, if you think maybe this isn't always, you might say, we don't believe in this because other people don't believe in it. Well, maybe they wanted to say, well, we don't see this actually happen. Maybe they're saying, well, it's very limited. Maybe that's a way that people wouldn't, again, why they want people to believe in these, I'm not really sure. But maybe they also just wanted people to avoid dangerous situations. Right? It was a way of protecting people. If you tell them demons will come, people will stay away from these situations. Now, again, these aren't for the most part, halachic situations. But again, they didn't want people to get into dangerous situations where robbers might attack them and other things might happen, or they might get scared. So they kind of told them in these words, well, evil spirits will get at you, maybe to kind of scare them into not going there. Again, I'm just offering possible ways of understanding it because as you can see from the simple reading, it's quite hard to understand. If you pass over water that was spilled, and even if your wife just spilled it in front of you, some people have the girsa that says if your daughter spilled it in front of you. In other words, you might have thought if somebody spills it right in front of you, so how could there be a demon there? You just saw it a minute ago. But no, the demons collect in these puddles of water, apparently. Okay, so now we're going to go through these four things. We're now going to start limiting them. It's only if there's not 4 cubits, our famous 4 cubits, right? That's a regular space. If there's more than 4 cubits between the palm tree and the wall, that's already not considered a very narrow space. And then we're not so worried about the demons. It's interesting that, Becky, I'm just looking at the chat a little bit. I see that you're talking about Bilam. So we'll hold off because we're going to get to Bilam. So good that you're thinking about it. But if there's 4 cubits, you don't have to worry about it. There's going to be a very similar structure in many of the comments today. It's going to say, lo amaran ela. It's only said in the case of this, where then it will be a problem. But if it's the reverse, then it won't be a problem. Okay, that's the late lambad. And there's no concern at all. When there isn't 4 amot, and then we're concerned for demons. Well, it's only if that's the only way that you can walk to get to where you're going. But if there's some other way to go, then again, it's not so dangerous because you can go one way, the demon could be the other way, and then you're allowed to go. The main thing is we don't want you to get trapped. And again, what if someone comes to rob you, right? If you think about it, you'll have nowhere to run. This is the only way to go. But if there's some other way, then you can always try to run around the other side. When we go between 2 palm trees and we said it was a problem, as long as there's no public thoroughfare in between the 2 decal trees, the 2 palm trees. But if there's a public street in between the 2 trees, well then late lamba, then obviously we're not worried. Hashotem mayim she'ulin. Now we're going to get back to this drinking borrowed water. What's the problem? Lo amaran ele deshailinu katan. We're only concerned about a young child drinking these waters. Aval gadol leit lamba, but we're not worried about an older child drinking waters or an older person. Vafilu shailinu katan nami lo amaran. And even when we say it's dangerous for a child to drink borrowed water, lo amaran ele besadeh, only in a field, lo shliche, because it's out there, right? And there it's harder to find water. Now you'd say maybe it's the reverse. It's so hard to find water, so he's going to need to borrow. But what's this? Sounds like Snow White, right? Which she brings her the apple, or that you should beware of strangers and things that they offer you, especially if you're children, because children can get taken advantage of by strangers. So beware of taking water from a stranger when you're out in the field and there's nobody else there, because it could be that the older person is trying to poison you. Again, I'm just trying to connect it to something that we can identify with, right? This fear of children, and we always teach children don't talk to strangers, right? We're not as worried about adults in this kind of area, but children especially. But in the city where it's much more common, then there's no concern. Right? There, we're not worried because you can find other water, and therefore we're not worried that someone's going to poison you with their water, or that there'll be demons in the water that you borrow. Now, in the fields, and this I can't explain so well, but we're only worried about water, but we're not worried about wine and beer. Now, again, it could be, this is about, again, this more relates harder for us to understand, but about demons. The demons were often found in water because the demons travel in the water, and they're found in water, not in man-made things, right? Where beer and wine are things that people created, there's less likelihood of demons getting in. But when it's something that's natural and out there, then there's more of a chance of the demons being there. When you pass over, the fourth thing we saw was passing over water that was spilled. As long as you didn't throw dirt on top of it, or you spit saliva in there. But if you threw something in it, either dirt or spit, then saliva, then late lamba, then we're not worried anymore, because you've kind of changed the makeup, right? I guess those things maybe scare the demons away. The lama, if you say it's germs and bacteria, it's a little more problematic because your saliva obviously has bacteria in it. But maybe it's your own saliva, and therefore we're not so worried. It's only if the sun hasn't seen this spill of water, this water on the ground. Or 60 steps haven't stepped in this water. Okay. This again, I think has to do with if the sun hasn't shone on it, then it's because it's dark maybe, and it's more of a concern in the darkness. And if 60 people haven't stepped in it, again, it means once 60 people step in it, well, then it's a common place and there's less likelihood of demons being there. Again, demons don't hang out when there's a lot of people. It's almost like rats or mice in your house, right? They don't come out when people are around. They only come out when nobody's around. But if the sun passed over it, or again, this is the same structure we keep seeing, or 60 steps have been stepped in it, then you don't have to worry about it anymore. We're still on this. So you have to worry about it if you're riding a donkey or you're wearing shoes. In other words, before we're talking about you're stepping in it, that's a problem. But or you're stepping over it. But if you are wearing shoes or ride on a donkey, then we don't have to worry about it. But if you're riding a donkey or you're wearing shoes, you don't have to worry about it. But that's only, we're going to limit that limitation though. That's only if you're in a place where there's no witches or witchcraft going around. But when there's concern of witchcraft and witches around, well then you have to be worried. And they're even going to bring a story to tell you why you have to be worried. There was a person, a guy who he was riding on a donkey and he was wearing shoes. He had both. Okay, it seemed before like you really only need one or the other. Even though it said viv, which means and, the first one really understand it as this or that. But then they say, what happened to this person? Sounds a little bit like the Wizard of Oz. Gamud misane vitsavu kare. His shoes shrunk and like shriveled up, and his legs dried out. And what happened was basically all of his protection was no longer there. And right, the witch was able to put a spell on him and cause his protection to kind of disappear. It doesn't really say what happened with his donkey, but apparently you see that it got to him anyway. Tanu Rabbanan. Now we have another Braita. Okay, this was right. So far we did these 4 things that Rish Lakish said that are dangerous, and we just explained when and how and in which cases would these really be dangerous, and limited them not to necessarily every case. But then at the end, we kind of said, well, if there's concern for witchcraft, then we have to kind of expand it again. Now we're going to talk about another thing. Three things where you shouldn't walk in between two of them, or two of you shouldn't walk around one of them. Okay, we're going to see what these things are. And this is obviously, at least regarding one of them, it's really talking only to men and not to women. Okay, a dog, you shouldn't walk in between two dogs. You shouldn't walk between two palm trees. This we saw already in Rish Lakish, and this is why we got to this, because it connected with the previous. And Aisha and a woman, you shouldn't walk two men around one woman, or a man in between two women. Okay, we're going to see a story about this also. Okay, again, the women issue seems to be tzniut related, right? That it's inappropriate, that he's going to think thoughts about the women and all that. The others are a little, right? Kelev, a dog, is always considered a bad thing. And we saw this concern about the tree, that the dekel, that there's demons there. Some people add the pig, and some people add a snake. And if you were to have done this, so how do you fix it? Amora Papa. Here comes Bilam. Niftach be'el v'nafsik be'el. Inami niftach below v'nafsik below. You should say a pasuk that starts with the word el and ends with the word el. Okay, the Rashbam quotes, and one that starts with lo and ends with lo. And we're going to talk about, the Rashbam is going to bring two psukim. Where from Bilam? Where do we have psukim that start with el and end with el and start with lo and end with lo? El motziam mitzrayim kilo nachash b'Yaakov ad ma pa'al el. Okay, I'm like about 8 lines from the bottom of the Rashbam. Niftach below, I'm saying below. This is a little bit complicated because you don't ever end a pasuk with the word lo. But he says, how about this one? Lo ish el v'yachazev, also from Bilam. Ad v'lo yikimena. It's the second to last word is lo. It ends with, and don't do this. That's the Rashbam. Now here I want to stop for a quick minute because there's something very interesting. If you look at Tosfot, so first Tosfot, he doesn't like the psukim that the Rashbam chooses, and he chooses other verses, which doesn't really matter because the point is find any verse that starts and ends like this, and that will protect you. Right? It's either, what's the idea here? It's either God's name it starts and ends with, or it starts and ends with no, right? Kind of, you have the power to say no, right? Don't get at me. I can get through this, right? Either God is going to help me, or my will to say no and to overcome this. But what does Tosfot point out? He says, and we learned this when we were talking about kameot, amulets in Masechet Shabbat. So we saw, okay, the second line of Tosfot here in Niftach, Dibor Matchel Niftach, he says, the second line, even though you cannot use divrei Torah to cure yourself from a disease. If you're sick, you're not supposed to recite psukim from the Torah to cure yourself. So how could we do this? This is what we're saying. If you're attacked by some demon, or you did something that's going to bring in problems, so use a verse. So what does Tosfot answer? Lahagein shani, to protect yourself is not the same. And I want to read you from the Rambam because it's very interesting. First of all, it appears in Hilchot Avodah Kochavim because it's Avodah Zarah, basically, right? It's like idol worship. To read psukim and say, these are going to protect me, is a type of idol worship. So he says here in Perek Yud Aleph Halacha Yud in Mishnah Torah in Hilchot Avodah Kochavim, he says, Halochesh al, and this is the Rambam, classic the Rambam, who didn't think that there were real demons around, right? And in general, he has a lot of issues with all sorts of those kind of emunot tefilot, as we call them, superstitious things. Halochesh al hamaka v'koreh pasuk min haTorah. If you start reciting an incantation on a wound, and by doing it, you read verses from the Torah. If you read psukim for a baby who's screaming and you want to calm the baby, Sefer Torah, here's an interesting custom. You put a Sefer Torah or tefillin ala katan b'shvil sheishan on a child so the child can sleep. Very interesting custom. Lo dai lehen she'em bichlal menachshim v'chovrim. It's not only that you're like a nachash and a chover, which are all types of witchcraft discussed in the Torah. Ela she'em bichlal, not only is it that, okay, he's very strongly against this. Ela she'em bichlal koflim b'Torah. These are people who basically go against, they're a kofir, they're apikoris, they go against the Torah. Shemosim divrei Torah refuat guf. They say the words of Torah are to heal your body. Veinan ele refuat nefashot. He says the Torah is not for your body, it's for your soul. The Torah is to protect your soul, not to protect your body. And therefore you can't use psukim to protect yourself. Shneimar v'yu chayim lenafshecha. He quotes a pasuk that these should be the life for your soul, not for your body. Aval, but he says, okay, so now what will you say? Well, we read Tehillim to help cure people, right? So what does he say about that? So notice they did read Tehillim in those days also. Aval habari, if you're healthy, shekara psukim, umizmor mitehillim, kedei shetagen alav, zechut, zechut kriyatan, v'yinatzel mitzarot u'minezakim, harei ze mutar. He says you can read Tehillim. First of all, he says if you're healthy. It sounds like almost if you're not healthy, you can't. But if you're healthy and you're reading it to just protect you from things that might come your way, a protection is different than healing. And one could say, when we say Tehillim nowadays, we don't say it, right? For those who say Tehillim, it's not that we think that the verses of the psukim are going to heal the person. We don't view it like that. We view it as a way, this is connecting us more to God, and we're praying to God to help us, right? To help heal the person who's sick. So that's different. That's not the same as saying these psukim are curing. That's not the same thing. So you have to walk a fine line between what you believe, right? If you believe that, then it's really problematic. And that's what Tosfot brings up and what the Rambam brings up, and basically has to explain these psukim are not functioning for that purpose. They're just protecting. They're not curing. Curing is something different. That's not allowed. Okay, that's an interesting aside. We'll get back to our daf now. Let's say you're going in, you're on a big thoroughfare, a parshat drachim, like an intersection, and there's two women sitting on either side. So you have one on one side and one on the other. Okay, this sounds like the beginning of Harry Potter, right? There's like a cat sitting there staring, okay? And it's clear that there is something going on here. So this is what they're basically saying. You get to this intersection, you see one woman on one side, one woman on the other side, and they're looking at each other, right? You see their eyes, and they're looking at each other. They're clearly witches, okay? That's what they say. So what do? Right? You have to cross this intersection, and there's witches sitting there. You're going to get attacked by them. First option, go find some other way to get into wherever you're going. But if you have no choice, always bring someone with you. Bringing someone, strengthens you, because again, the more vulnerable you are, you're more vulnerable when you're alone. So if there's somebody else with you, you take his hands, hold hands, and pass right by them, right? Again, this is what you say. If you go with confidence, right, then hopefully it won't get you. If there's nobody with you, nemahachi. Agrat, Azlat, Asya, Blusia, Miktala. Blusia. Those are the names of the demons. Okay, so say all these names, or it's like some incantation. Mitkala bechek kovel. There's two ways of reading it. Either you've already been shot by arrows and you're dead, and therefore you can't get to me, or you're saying you will be shot by arrows and therefore you don't scare me. Again, one can view it as psychological, and one can view it as you're actually scaring the witches away. You're saying, I'm confident you can't get to me, okay, because of my confidence. Okay, this is a big issue. When a woman comes out of the mikveh, we're not talking about nowadays where a woman comes out of the mikveh and she's fully dressed and she's dried her hair, or maybe not dried her hair, but at least she's walking out of the mikveh, it's not such a big deal. But there we're talking about that the woman actually just got out of the water, okay? And she comes out of the water, because in those days they went to the mikveh out in public. She went, right, hopefully no one was around, but here she comes out and there's a man right there, and that's already much less appropriate. And again, whether she's dressed, covered, not covered, still, he sees her getting out of the water. That's going to cause him to have all sorts of thoughts about her. So if that happens, okay, this is, by the way, Tosfot brings up, it's actually accidentally quoted on Daf Kuf Yud Amud Aleph instead of here, but he brings up a question on this Gemara. What about Rabbi Yochanan, who sat, see, people are asking, I knew someone would ask, Rabbi Yochanan, who sat in the Sharei Tefillah, how did he do that? So Tosfot brings, I think it's 3 different possible answers. He was sitting, here you bump into her, that's different. There it was Sharei Tefillah, and here it's when she comes out of the water. That was already farther away. And it could be, the best answer Tosfot brings is, we're going to see there's a solution here. It could be Rabbi Yochanan would use the pasuk that we use as a solution here to protect you, and therefore he kind of went into danger but protected himself with the verse, and then he was okay, which would be kind of strange, because it seems like you shouldn't get yourself in the situation. If you do, you can read a verse to get you out of it, but obviously the question is a very good question. Okay, so here goes. Let's see what you're supposed to do. So first they tell you this is what's going to happen. If this is to happen to you, you bump into this woman as she's getting out of the mikveh, if he first has relations with his wife when he gets home. The assumption is he's going to be thinking about this woman, and you're not allowed to have sexual relations with your wife when you're thinking about some other woman. So this spirit of promiscuity is going to get into him. There's evil spirit. If she goes, now there's an assumption that she's thinking about him. Then she's going to end up. The idea here is whoever does it first, meaning they must have, been very desirous of each other, and therefore they couldn't sleep with each other, so they went and slept with their spouse. But thinking about the other ones, whoever does it first, it shows like they had a very strong desire. A desire is going to bring out this ruach znunim. So now, how do you fix this issue? My takante lemahachi, say the following: shofech buz al nidivim v'yat'em betohu lo darech. Okay, so now the assumption, the way I read a commentary, is that the desire throws booze. It embarrasses the nidivim. The nidivim are the princes, right? It brings out embarrassment. This desire is a terrible thing. It can even embarrass the higher ups. And it sends them on their way. It's not really a path. It's tohu, right? Like nothingness. And darech is also often a reference to sexual relations. So therefore saying lo darech, this isn't the way to do things. So that, by saying that pasuk, you protect yourself. You're basically saying, I understand I have an issue, right? Once you're understanding of it, that's already puts you in a better place. Even if I go in the depths, right, of the tzalmavet. So what is tzalmavet? If you sleep in the shadow of a lone palm tree, ubetzel levanan, in the shade of the moon, the shadow of the moon. But now we're going to limit these again. It's only if there's not another shadow from another palm tree also on you. If you have shadow of two palm trees, then it's not an issue. If you have the shadow of the other on you, late lamba, then you don't have to worry about it. But it says in a bright here it says if you sleep in the shadow of a lone palm tree in your courtyard, it sounds like it's only in your courtyard. Here it sounds like it's anywhere. So you can get killed. So what's the case? If you say there's no other shadow of any other tree and that's why, well then it shouldn't be only in your courtyard. It should be even in the fields. It must be when it comes to your courtyard, because your courtyard, again, is a more contained space and there's less room to run away. Therefore, there's more danger. And even if you have a shadow of another palm tree on you, you're still not protected from the evil spirits. We're talking about the moon and the shadow of the moon. When it's on the west, when the shadow is on the west, which is in the beginning, at the end of the month, the moon is in the east. According to the Rashbam, you see the Rashbam says that the moon is in the east and it sets its shadow in the west. So because of that, that's when it's going to be an issue. But in the beginning of the month, when it's the reverse and the shadow is in the east, because the moon is in the west, then it's not a concern. So it's only sometimes of the month that the shadow is going to be a concern. Again, these are things that are hard to understand what the meaning of all this is. If you urinate on the trunk of a palm tree, the ruach palga is going to get to you. Okay, that's the name of this particular demon. If you put your head, you lean your head on the palm tree, ruach tzrada. The ruach tzrada is going to get to you, which is Rashi says it's a half your head is going to have a headache. Some people say it's like a migraine. You're going to get migraines. Haiman de pasa adikla. Again, I told you there's a lot of issues with palm trees here. If you pass over a stump of a palm tree, imiktal ktil. If it was cut down by someone, you'll be killed by someone. If it was uprooted, you're going to be uprooted and die. Either way, you're going to die. It's unclear if there's a difference. It means someone else is going to kill you or not exactly sure, but either which way, you're going to die because it's a sign of what's going to happen to you because you passed over it. Again, this sounds very much like superstitions. But this is, by the way, only if you don't put your foot on it. But if you actually stepped on it, sounds like if you step over it, but if you stepped on it, it's not an issue. Okay, there's a different version of this text. Our text is a little bit problematic. It says there's 5, and if you count, there's really only 4. Some people change it by saying it really means 4, not 5. Some people add a 5th one to make it match up. Again, it's not that they added it and said, oh, let's fix it, but they had different versions of the text. So there's 5 shadows here that are dangerous. Tula de dikla yichida, this we've seen many times, the shadow of a lone palm tree. Tula de kinada, it's a name of a tree. Tula de pircha, this is a caper bush. Tula is always shade. Okay, tet and tzadi switch in Aramaic. So tet is tzadi. So tzul is tzel, the shadow, the shade of the tree. Tula de zardata, of a zardata tree. Ika de amre, so first of all, some people add in the 5th is a fig tree. Some people say av tula de arba, even the shadow of a boat. Vit tula de arvata, and a willow bush, like the aravot in the 4 minim that we have. Klala de milta, the rules are this. Kol de nafish anfe, kashe tula. The shadow is going to be a problem if it has a lot of branches. This makes sense because, again, it's a place that's very hidden that the evil spirits can hang out there. The kol de kashe silve, and the worse the thorns are, kashe tula. Again, the shadow is worse. It's more of a chance, maybe because it has thorns, so it's indicative of something bad, and it's more likely. Other than levar, except for kare masa, it's a type of tree. Afagav de kashe silve, even though their thorns are sharp, lo kashe tule, its shade is not dangerous. To amrele, how do we know this? This is a strange way to know this, because someone overheard a conversation between an evil spirit and her son. Amrele sheda libere, this demon said to her son, pirche nafshech mi karu masa. Run away from karu masa, stay far away from this tree. Why? This killed your father and will kill you. Okay. Some people say, and it killed you. Some people say, right, it makes no sense to say it will. Right, it makes more sense to say it will kill you. Amor Rav Ashi, Chazina la Rav Kahana de Parish Mikulu Tule. Okay, he says now that I saw Rav Kahana that he kept away from shadows of all trees, even though we just said it's not all trees, but he kept away from the shadow of all trees because he was nervous about any kind of shadows. Be Parche, now we're going to get the names. The ones who are in the Parche tree, Ruche, or called Ruche. De Be Zardata, Sheda. De Be Igare, Rishpe. These are their names. So, of course, you'll ask this question, which the Gemara asked, L'may nafkamina, why do we need to know the names of the demons? They say, L'kamea. Oh, we're going to learn about this for the amulets because they wrote amulets to protect from demons. So now we need to know, and right, people still wear amulets today to protect from demons or hang up garlics and all sorts of things like this. Right? If you say this isn't relevant nowadays, people do still believe in these kinds of things. So you have to know what to write in the amulet. You have to know what you're fighting against. So therefore you need to know their name. Debate Parche, here we're going to see some other things about them. Be Parche is a bria she'en la'inayim. It doesn't have eyes. L'may nafkamina. Why do we need to know this? L'gazuzela, to run away from it. Because if you run away, they're not going to find you, right? If you're there and it doesn't have eyes, well, it's easy to run away. Zimnach, I just read a story with my daughter for school, one of those reading comprehension. It was about some case where they went and there was a guard was blind. So they thought, oh, they could steal and get away with it and he wouldn't see them, right? Same idea. Of course, they got caught, but that was a different story. Okay, he went to urinate right where Be Parche was. Shama de Ka'ate ilave v'gazela. So he heard that Be Parche was there and he ran away. Ki azla, as he ran, right, what happened? The demon ran after him, but the demon couldn't see. And now we got to our case about the palm tree. Chabke ledikla, the spirit hit into the palm tree because she couldn't see. Savach dikla upakahi. Okay, some people say upakahi parcha, right? And the demon parcha burst, okay, because she slammed into this tree. Debe zardata shide. Ha zardata desmicha lamata. We're talking about a zardata tree that's near the city. Lo pachta mishitin shede. There's no less than 60 demons in this. Okay, if you get to a tree, a zardata outside the city, that's near the city, there's going to be 60 demons inside. L'may nafkamina. Again, why does this matter? L'michtav lekameh, to know how to write a kameh. Well, now we're going to hear a story about someone who didn't know this, and you'll see what happens. Hahu bar kasha. There was Rashi says he was the shomer of the city, the guard. Da'azil v'kai gabe zardata. He ended up walking, I guess as he was guarding, he went a little bit outside the city to check what was going on. He got near this tree. To have a samech lamata that was right near the city. Alube shitin shedev istaken. So 60 evil spirits got into him from the tree and he was going to die. He went to a rabbi or a student who didn't know that this tree has 60 demons in it. So which obviously didn't help him. He wrote an amulet for one demon, but this had way more than one demon in it. Shama detalu chinga begave. So he hears now, okay, this guy who's stuck with this demon in him, he hears in the tree, the detalu chinga, all the demons hung up musical instruments, begave, inside it, and they're singing the following song. Okay, here's this noise, right, which says, Sudre Demar Kitsurva Me Rabban. And again, this could be his inner voice telling him this, right? This guy looks like a Talmid Chacham. He's got a sudar, right? I have this hat on my head, this scarf, right? That's like a kind of scarf, a turban he wore on his head. So the turban of this person makes him look like he's a Talmid Chacham. But Badikna Be Bemar de Lo Yada Baruch, but he doesn't even know how to make a blessing. He doesn't know Aleph Bet. He doesn't even understand how to get rid of these shadim. So either the evil spirits are kind of singing and mocking him. You obviously don't know anything. Or the person himself is wondering, why did I turn to this rabbi who appears to be a rabbi, but he clearly doesn't know anything. Ata ume Rabbana, and a different Talmid Chacham comes by, a rabbi. Diyada dizardata shitin shede. He knew that there were 60 demons in there. Katav lekameh shitin shede. So he writes them a kameh for 60 demons. Shama de ka'amru, and then he hears them saying, Panu manaychu mehacha. Take all your utensils and let's get the heck out of this tree. And then they ran off. Okay, what's interesting about this? So anyone who goes to the skills class, we learned about afikomen this week, which is coming up in a few pages. Now, one of the roots of the word afikomen is afiko manaychu, take your kalim out. And here we have panu manaychu, which you can't help but see the similarity. Maybe there's some reference here to afikomen about taking your kalim out. Ketev miriri. Okay, ketev miriri is coming from a verse in Parshat Ha'azinu, in the song that Moshe sings to the Jewish people at the end of the Torah. And he says about things that are going to, all sorts of bad things are going to happen to you if you leave the way of God. And one of them is ketem miriri. So that's a name of a demon. And they're going to tell you that there's trei kitvei havu. One comes from another famous pasuk that you might know from the tefillot. So there's two types of ketevs. Chad mekami tira. One appears before the afternoon, meaning in the morning. V'chami batar tira. And the other before the afternoon. After the afternoon, in the afternoon. The one that comes early in the day is called ketemiriri. It appears, if you find it inside the kutach, remember the kutach, that was that dip they had? So it finds itself in there and it mixes, it like bubbles around in the kutach. The bater tira, the one in the afternoon, is called ketev yashud sarayim. It's from Perak of Tehillim. Midever ba'ofa yaloch. You'll probably recognize from Tefillah. Miketev yashud sarayim. That's its name. Shmo. Umechse bekarna di'iza. You find it between the karnaim of the goats, between the horns of the goats. The hadr be knafya, and it looks knafya. It looks like a sieve that's spinning. I don't know exactly what that means. Abai have a shatla va'azil Rav Papa mimine. So Abai was walking one day. Rav Papa was on his right. Rav Huna bered Rav Yoshua mismaleh. He was on the left. Rav Huna bered Rav Yoshua. So now what happens? He sees the ketemiriri on his left. So what does he do? He's got Rav Papa on his right and Rav Huna bered Rav Yoshua on his left. So what does he say? So he swaps places. Okay, now you might think, why is he swapping places? It could be he just thinks if he kind of tricks, right, the shade is about to get one of them. If he switches them around, maybe that will help. But it's not the answer he gives him. But I'm not sure. Maybe it doesn't really matter. Maybe that really was the reason, and he gives a different reason. But we'll see. Amarle Rav Papa. So Rav Papa gets wind of what's going on, and he says, "Ana ma'ishna de lo chashash li. Why aren't you worried about me? Why are you sticking me in the line of danger?" Amarle ad sha'ata kayamalach. You have a lot of profits. You're a rich guy. You clearly, the demons don't get at you. So therefore, I know if I put you there, I won't have to worry about it. Okay. So again, whether that's really the reason or not really the reason, it's a good question. It could be just the answer he's giving to Rav Papa. It could be he just thought he'd fool them around, but maybe he figures if he gives Rav Papa the confidence that the demons won't get him, also maybe Rav Papa will have enough confidence and nothing will happen. From the 1st of Tammuz to the 16th of Tammuz, Vadai Shchiche. That's when you find this ketev shade, this demon. Mikam Elach, but other times of the year, Safek Shchiche, Safek Lo Shchiche. You might find them, you might not. Umishtakhe Betule, where would you find it? In the shade of the chatzba, of the chatzav tree, the lo chatzav garmida, that hasn't grown yet to the height of a cubit. Ubetule ditzafra upanya, and in the shade of the morning and the evening, de lo have garmida, which is a very small shadow, right? When the shadow is very short, less than an amma. Garmida is an amma, a cubit. The ikar betule de betakise, and the place where they're found is in the shade of the bathrooms. Remember, the outhouses, we said, were more prone to dangers because they were out of the way and nobody else, when people went there alone. Amar of Yosef, right? We had that in Brachot, where the women go to the bathroom in pairs. I think it was in Brachot, right? Which people always laugh, like people still do it today, right? You want to go to the bathroom, you're somewhere, you ask someone to go with you, right? So it comes from the Gemara, actually. I don't know if that's why people do it nowadays, but it also appears there. Amar of Yosef, these following three things cause blindness. Man if you comb your hair when it's dry. Uman deshate tif, if you drink the drips that are coming out of the barrel, if you drink drips of wine as they're dripping out of the barrel. Umin de b'sayim masane adamaitina kari, if you put your shoes on before your feet dry. Okay, so again, what to make of these is a good question. Tlai bebete kasha lanute, if you hang your food in your house, it's a sign that you're going to be impoverished. Kida'am ra'inashi, as people say, talasilta, talamazone, if you hang your food, your parnasa, your livelihood will be hanging, right? You won't know whether you'll have it or not. That's poverty. This, by the way, we're only talking about hanging bread. You shouldn't hang bread. But meat and fish, late lamba, because that's the way people normally, they would hang them if they didn't have refrigeration. This was the way they would keep it from spoiling. But we're talking about foods that aren't normally hung. Again, it's superstitious. Hang your food, your sustenance will be in hanging. If you use bran, okay, they mean bran was always considered the cheaper form of bread. And here it's mainly if you can afford the better bread and you don't use it, then it shows you're stingy and then you're going to end up being poor. Right? It's against stinginess. Nishora bebeta, crumbs of bread in the house, kashe laniyuta, are a sign of poverty. There's some custom about cleaning off the crumbs on Shabbat from the table. Okay, this comes from here because they're going to say it's bilele Shabbatot bilele rivi'it shara mizikin ilave. Specifically, where the crumbs are, the evil spirits get there on Tuesday nights and Saturday and Friday nights. This is what we talked about in the beginning. There was the Tuesday night and the Friday night. Now we come back to this. Isari de Mizone, right? It was in today. I'm actually now confused, but maybe it's in tomorrow's daf. Oh, sorry, it's in tomorrow's daf. I taught it last night, so I don't recall anymore. Anyway, I'll be up in a little bit after class. We're going to get back to this Tuesday night and Friday night. Okay, so it's confusing when I teach out of order. Okay, Isara de Mizone Nakid Shmei, the angel that's in charge of sustenance, is called Nakid. Nakid, the understanding is it means cleanliness. The idea is keep your house clean and then you'll have sustenance. But Isara Daniyuta, the malach of poverty, Naval Shmei, is called Naval, which is dirt and disgusting. And if your house is dirty, that will bring poverty. Sa Pume de Chatzba, if you put a plate on the opening of the barrel, Kashe Laniyuta, this is a sign of poverty. Man deshate maya b'tzai kashe lebrukte, if you drink water out of a bowl, it's like dogs and cats drink, right? Animals, then it's going to be bad. You're going to have a problem with your eyes and your vision. Again, it was just a way of telling people, right? Try to keep your house clean. Try not to eat like a dog, or right, all these kind of things. If you eat cress, this is going to start a whole new thing that goes into tomorrow about this idea. And this is where it really sounds like bacteria. If you do certain things and you don't wash your hands, Yomi, you're going to have fears for 30 days. Right? This is what we call, right, in psychology, the world of psychology, you have all these fears. Soon the Gemara is going to say in tomorrow's daf, well, you don't even know what these fears are, right? You're going to have a fear for something you don't even know what you're fearing, right? That's the worst kind of fear because you don't even know how to deal with it. So this one is 30 days. You'll see it goes down and down and down until it gets to one day, depending on what the issue is. This causes fear for 30 days. This causes for less. Anyway, we'll stop here for today. All sorts of food for thought, other things for thought. Anyway, or maybe not. Maybe you just want to be finished with this stepping. We'll be there soon on Kuf Yud Dalet only, though. We're going to get back to our regular Pesachim stuff. Okay, we a little bit get back to it tomorrow, but immediately jump off and get off into other things. So by Kuf Yud Dalet, we're already back on the Seder, and then we get really into, if you've been waiting, aren't we learning about Seder here, right? We haven't done too much, but we're going to get all into it from there through most of the rest of the parak. Not the whole thing, but most of it. So Shabbat Shalom, everybody.